Hi there, thank you for joining us. I'm here with Pastor Chad, lead pastor here at Freedom Life Church, and we're following up on this latest edition of the Trajectory series. And if you missed it, you can go check on Facebook right below this for a link to our website that has the video, and you can watch it there and catch up. And great message about prayer.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Well, I definitely cut out a bunch. I almost took us to, it shows up in at least most of the four Gospels where Jesus will actually talk about not praying a certain way. Because I really didn't go as practical as I had originally planned for this particular sermon to be, like a lot of just practicalities and what to do and what not to do, that kind of thing. But then the closer we got, and then I had an extra week because we divided up the last sermon. So, I really just, maybe for my own personal heart, really enjoyed we're the temple of God.
Yeah.
And so when Jesus is talking about this, he knows what's going to happen. This temple, this building that I'm standing in is not really what I'm talking about, because that's never what he's talking about. He even makes a quote that we didn't read the text, another text I just kind of cut out and said, I don't need it for this sermon. But he says at one point, like, I'm going to tear this temple down, and then in 3 days it's going to be raised again. And they're all like, how are you going to build a building in 3 days? Number one, why are you going to tear it down? And then number two, how are you going to rebuild it in 3 days? That doesn't make sense. Well, that's because he's not talking about the building. He's talking about him. And so Jesus always does this. He makes a habit of doing this kind of thing. And so it's not surprising that he's going to talk about this. And I think that it can and does apply to the corporate setting of believers, but I think the only reason why it does is because of we all walk in as a temple, as a house for God's presence. Like, we all walk in that way. So I made a joke about, the auditorium. I made a joke about what we're sitting in, that it's like a glorified shed, and it's nothing, spectacular. It's nothing magical about this place, but that when we come together, but that it should be marked by prayer, but that's because the people of prayer have walked in.
Yeah.
And so I just really loved that concept. And so for me, we're going to go, I think I mentioned it really, really fast in passing, but I was going to take us to the text where he talks about, don't be like these guys that stand out on street corners to be seen. We use prayer as some sort of like, look at the religious achievement that I've made, or look how amazing I am, instead of prayer being something that is communion with your God, with your Father, because that's where he goes. He says, but when you pray, go into your closet. And so we were going to talk about that. Like, does it have to be your closet? Or what does that mean? And even maybe talk a little bit about personal prayer versus corporate prayer. Is corporate prayer bad? I mean, some people just pray it out loud. Is that what he's talking about? And try to unpack. No, that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the condition of a person's heart and saying, we want to commune with God. So if we're praying even corporately and helping to lead a moment of prayer, it's not that somebody is trying, it's not like Scott Brooks, on Sunday as he walks up at the end of worship and begins to pray, powerfully pray, into this moment that we had. It's not as if he was trying to show off. That's not that. Because I think you can feel and sense the difference. I think we're all wise enough to do that. So we were going to spend some time on a lot of that. Or how do you pray? Well, you pray with a heart that connects with the heart of God. And we were going to kind of dive into that side of it as well. And, don't pray with a bunch of babblings like trying to placate God with many words. You don't have to do that. We talked about that reality that you don't need fancy words. We just didn't really spend a whole lot of time in those texts. I ended up just removing those completely and just going, I think we can talk briefly about that, but I just really loved the idea of temple. And then we really needed to deal with the distractions, the busyness, the craziness of life, because that tends to be our reasoning behind not having a prayer life, not being a person that prays, is because we have so much other stuff to do.
Yeah.
But the reality is we need to engage in prayer to get into that rhythm of life that we go out into the crazy, but then we back away. And that's really what I wanted to make paramount. I will say that I think the idea of us being the house of God's presence, being the temple of God and should be marked by prayer, I think that resonated with our people more than what I even anticipated. I thought it was good. I thought it was a great thought, but I think it really resonated with the people here at Freedom Life in a very good way, but maybe more than I had anticipated. So we actually spent a little bit more time. I just took a little bit more time on the front end to say, well, okay, let's talk about this. Let's do a little bit more work on this concept. And then we'll get to the distraction and busyness of life towards the end. But we needed to deal with that because the whole series is prayer is what keeps you on the trajectory that you want to be on and that God has you on, and it's distractions and busyness that tends to pull you away, and that seems to be what we're really trying to do in this series, is talk about how do we keep ourselves from being pulled away from this and staying on. So it was intended to be more practical, and I think it's good for all of us to think through, what works best for us. And so if I can just briefly. Prayer is conversation. We talked about that. And so it doesn't have to be some fancy thing at the very beginning of this series. We talked about you don't have to make some grand gesture to God. And so if you take that concept and apply it here to your a life of prayer, building a lifestyle of prayer is probably not even as difficult as some may even think that it is, because you don't have to be this religious elite. A prayer life is not reserved for just the religious elite in our mindset. Whoever we paint as that, it's not reserved it's reserved for all of us. And so we can find pockets throughout our day to find ways for us to commune and communicate with God, to talk about where we're hurting, because that's what it is. Talk about the greatness of the day. And all of that. So, there's so many little pockets, little moments that we can find. And you can just say thank you. That was one of the practical things that I was going to spend some time on, that if you don't know how to pray, like if you don't even know what to say thank you. You're breathing, right? You're breathing. Your brain is functioning in a way that you're being able to think and worry about the fact that you don't know how to pray. Thank God that you got a brain that's contemplating and thinking through that. And thankfulness is, it's so foundational to a vibrant life of prayer, because it can begin there, it can end there. It can be all there. Because we have so much to be thankful for, even in times where it feels like we don't. We can find it.
Oh yeah.
We can find areas of thankfulness where we can go, God, I'm so grateful. And that can be prayer. That's where we almost should start always, is just to thank God.
Well, you were talking a little bit ago about, the idea of how Jesus is teaching and saying, here's what not to do.
Yeah.
He follows that right up with, here's how to do it. And, that's where he gives us the Lord's Prayer. The first part of that is praise and thanks. And that's right where it goes
to. And so we were going to spend time kind of that way, but that's why I'm like, even in this moment, I would encourage anybody that's listening and watching, it doesn't have to be as difficult as you think. Yeah. And so, because it can just be full of thanks. Thank you, God. It can even just be that.
Yeah.
Because he deserves it. He deserves just thanks all the time, every second of every day. So that's easy to pray. It's easy to go, oh, thank you that I'm breathing, that I'm alive, that I'm here for my family and my kids. Thank you, for taking care of them, giving me them. There's so many things. I mean, you could rattle off 20 things right now to really be thankful for if you just sat for 2 seconds and thought about it. And so much of that is I think maybe even the beginning of developing a great lifestyle of prayer is finding ways to just express thanks to God. And then that just kind of gets the ball rolling because thankfulness always leads to praise, like what you're talking about in that text with the Lord's Prayer, which we talked a lot about in the past. We've spent some time with the Lord's Prayer a little bit in another series that we kind of drew out some things there. But praise, follows up from, when you begin to be thankful, praise begins to be, the expression of that thanks. And so that's not difficult. It's not hard. It doesn't have to be, you don't even have to be a beautiful communicator. You can be messy because God knows that. And and then some of the stuff that maybe we would have talked about that I just didn't deal with that much is, the question I get a lot around prayer is, well, if God already knows what I'm going to say before I'm going to say it, if he already knows what I need before I need it, why do I need to pray? And my response is always, why wouldn't you want to pray? Like, why wouldn't you want to talk to the God of the universe about your life? And I think that so often, prayer isn't about making sure God knows what's happening. I think it's about us being able to commune with him, with the one that can do something about what's happening. And I think it's about drawing our hearts towards the heart of God. And so, prayer, like pretty much everything else, is less about trying to fill some vacancy in God because he has none. It's about filling what we need, and we need a communion with somebody that's bigger than us, greater than us, more powerful than us, and we need that, and we need to build, relationship with him. And so he gives us this gift and this access through the blood of Christ to come and talk to him. And so I'm like, why wouldn't you? Because again, it's less about downloading your issues and your problems. You can talk to God about those, but it's not just download and walk out. It's a conversation. And we mentioned that in the sermon. It's not a monologue. And that was some of those kind of sprinklings of what the sermon, I think, originally kind of was more of that practical, don't monologue, be grateful, a lot of those kind of practical ideas, but that just almost ended up just more sprinkled in there, instead of maybe doing a whole sermon on it. Because again, all we have is eternity in front of us. We can do a series on prayer where we can really kind of get down into the nitty gritty and talk about that. But, I kind of left it for just, those little mentions in the sermon to say it's not as hard as what you might think that it is. Or some people can be intimidated by building a life of prayer, and you don't have to be.
Yeah. I think one of the best analogies that I can think of is, the idea of calling your parents up. Just having a conversation with your parents.
Don't mention if my parents watch this, they're going to comment on underneath and be like, yeah, he doesn't do that as much as he should. All right. But yes, no, you're right.
But, the whole idea of, you're talking to your Heavenly Father.
Yes.
Just call and chat.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be this big formal thing. It's just
and he's so longing for that. That's why he gives us the gift of it. That's why he lends us his ear. He inclines his ear to our prayers. That's what the psalmist will say multiple times. He inclines his ears to us. He wants to hear us, and he wants to speak to us. He does. He wants to build, relationship with us, and I just think that's unbelievable. And so I don't know why we would pass up on that or try to make it harder than it is.
Yeah.
Because it's just not.
Again, going back to where Jesus is teaching on this Sermon on the Mount is really what comes to mind there. He's talking about don't pray like this, don't pray like this, don't get all wordy, all this stuff. And I think the point he's trying to make there is when you're doing those things, you're making it about you.
Absolutely.
And not about God.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, that's where we kind of have to then, and I guess this kind of circles back around to where we're started is, these are the don'ts.
Yeah.
It's got to be, you got to make sure your heart is in the right place when you're praying. And you're not just,
Well, the don'ts become freeing.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, there's another rule. It's like the don'ts become freeing. Like, you don't have to be whatever it is that you've conjured up in your mind as to what prayer is supposed to look like. It can look like you talking. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, some of the purest, most powerful prayers I've ever heard is when I've had individuals come to me and go, I don't know Jesus and I want to know him. And I'll go, well, why don't you talk to him? And they expect me to do like the typical, like, I'm going to pray and you repeat after me. I don't really do that. I go, you talk to God. I'm not going to, I don't need to. You need to. You talk to him. And then when they begin to talk to God, they don't know all of the Christianese that we use. They don't know a whole bunch of verses. I mean, a lot of times they don't. And then when they begin to talk to God just out of this purest place of their heart, God, I'm stupid. I've done a lot of bad things. It's just the simplicity and I need you. You're my only hope. And I see now that you love me and that I need, and you're just going unbelievable. I go, that is the best example I can give of you don't have to be rehearsed here.
Yeah.
You don't have to be practiced here. I think you do grow. The more you pray, the more you can. Does that make sense? So the longer you could, the longer you can pray, because you begin to love this communion with God. And so you fall in love with, I can talk to God and he talks to me. This is incredible. I want to do that all the time. It's like, go back to family or whatever. It's like, when I want to talk to my wife, when we were dating and when man, it was on the phone, right? We're talking all the time. I mean, it's nonstop, right? And even now, like we walk into the house, we're not quiet and just sit there and not talk. It's instant.
Yep.
Second you walk in the door, you're talking to each other and you're saying, what's up? And how's it going? I love you. And what, how was the day? I mean, you're automatically talking. And that's what I want for me. That's what I want for us as a community of faith here at Freedom Life. And that's what I want for all believers is to fall in love with prayer, to fall in love with it, to fall in love with the God that lets you talk to him, who's alive and who wants a relationship with you. I think that's amazing. I'm like going, that's awesome. And so I want people to engage that. And I think then you do grow and you start reading the word more as you're talking to him. You're hearing his voice through his word. And so then you get some of those verses to pray out and all of that. But it doesn't have to be that, even to begin with. It just needs to be you talking with God. Yeah. And that's what it can be. And then you develop a real passion and love for your prayer life because you realize it's not religious activity. It is relationship building. I mean, it's meant to be that, So anyway, I'm hoping that people kind of came alive with it. We ended the service differently. Yeah. But I felt like, by and large, the vast majority of the people that were in the room on Sunday, I think really took that moment seriously, and they did not run out, like we do so often sometimes as, man, the second we say amen at the end, we roll out. But when we invited everybody to sit and just stay until they felt like they were done talking with God, but to spend some time praying. And we did have some people in the altars, but we had a ton of people just stay, just stop and just spend time with God for a few minutes. And then, they kind of trickled out, Yeah. They just, everybody just kind of trickled out when they were done. And I thought that was really cool, cause we're just trying to build that in to people, and that's our hope. So. Yeah.
And it was a very great service. And again, if you missed that, you can, go on our website, look at the link below here. It'll get you there. Watch that, kind of connect with that. We've got lots of opportunities. If you're going, well, how do I connect more with prayer? We've got a prayer group that meets pretty regularly. Yes. We're doing the 24 hours of prayer this year.
I want everybody to get involved in that. I think we've got a few time slots that still don't have anybody in them. but they're filling up. I mean, we've got a lot of time slots that we had to add extra lines to, and so because people are just going, I want in on that. So it's been really cool. There's some hard time slots, but I know we've got some people that maybe can cover them for us. So, but I'm excited about that. This year is going to be full of just the people of Freedom Life Church taking time to pray in every hour of every day, and I think that that's super cool.
Yep.
So.
Another great opportunity we have coming up is the next class of the discipleship series.
Yeah.
That is February 16th.
16th.
And you can register for that online at freedomlifechurch.net/FL-discipleship. Or you can just go on the app and under the Connect section, it's there. It's a little easier to explain too.
We're going to talk all about the Bible in this class, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
Pretty good place to go.
How is it put together? How can we trust what we're reading is what they wrote, and just a lot of that kind of stuff. Just some fun. It'll be a ton of information, but that really just helps to support and fortify our faith, in the Word. So it's going to be fun.
That'll be fun. Great. I know the last time y'all met, people didn't leave.
No, the last class was supposed to be 2 hours long. I think it ended up being about 5.5, and I think a healthy group of us left at about midnight. That doesn't have to be you. I'm just saying, don't let that scare you. But I just, it was just one of those topics, I think, that just really drew people in and just said, I've got a billion questions about that. And so a lot of people hung out because I tell them in the classes, like, I'll stay here until you're done asking questions. And they took me up on that. And so when the class was over, I was like, okay, we're at 2 hours. We were done with the class. I said, I'll keep answering questions. And they kept asking. And so we kept answering. And it was awesome.
So, but that'll be, and that's February 16th. So if you're interested in that, make sure you get registered just so you know kind of how many to plan for.
Yes, we want to know how many are going to be there and all that.
If day of you decide you want to come, I'm sure that's absolutely welcome too. So. No life groups this week. It's family week, so spend time with your family. And then we'll see you next Sunday, 10:30.
See you.